Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. I've been getting a lot of subscribers lately. You don't want to be left out on all the hot action. Plus, just that drive to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark and all that kind of stuff, getting closer and closer. Hell, closer than I ever expected actually getting to it, than I would have, anticipated when I first started this channel. So, jump on the bandwagon. You'd like bandwagons. Speaking of bandwagons, I find myself possibly getting a little tired of YouTube. Not in terms of me making videos for YouTube, but, I don't know, it's just the content is just getting stale. I'm tired of the constant back and forth and the factionalism and the misinformation. I know it's a negative buzzword, but there's a lot of purposely distorted stuff put out there as if it's true stories, and a lot of raw speculation presented as absolute fact out there in the world, especially in nerd circles about nerd properties, television shows, movies, role-playing games, all that kind of stuff. There's a phenomenon of the rush to get the content out and the rush to have a nice, juicy, clickbaity headline. People tend to just kind of skim through news articles and just find the first thing that they can find in it that they can then run off with and try to make some sort of hay out of, whether or not that's really an accurate reflection of what's going on. Ironically, at the same time, though, after many years of kind of not really watching television much anymore, at least most of the half decade, I've kind of just checked out on TV shows, but I actually find myself for the last month or so watching several different things. Not all of which are perfect, but, that I do find some way to enjoy them. Hot take number one, I actually rather enjoy watching She-Hulk. It's heavily flawed, and there's certainly lots of things about it to talk about, but the level of vehemence to some of the fan discussions around this show get basically summed up as the people who decided they weren't going to like it before it came out don't think it's very good, and the people who decided they were going to like it before it came out think it's great. Which isn't terribly informative. It just means that, people chose a position before even laying eyes on the motherfucker, and, they've just decided to stick to their guns, and they will find anything they can to justify their position. The Doomcock crap from last week, there's some irony going on here, at least from, a boys club fandom of just we got this show written by women with a female character, ostensibly for a female audience. And so, of course, the guys have to make it all about themselves, the people saying, that mask, they're making fun of Doomcock. I don't know, are they? I showed some pictures to my wife. She didn't really think that the masks really matched very well, aside from the vague flesh tone. I mean, the masked guy, from the video at the very end of the second to last episode of She-Hulk. I haven't seen the season finale yet because it's early in the morning, and I intend to watch it with my wife a little bit later in the day. But, that was also a very strong nod towards the old Anonymous videos where the people who'd wear the Guy Fawkes mask. Also, I mean, it kind of reminds me of the mask style that the little demon masks that the band members of Ghost wear. So to say it's Doomcock of all people, I mean, haven't you noticed that Doomcock is consistently wrong all the time? It was dumb of people to platform him as much as they did. Not because of any you shouldn't be platforming alt-right voices or anything like that, but just because he's provably full of shit over and over and over again with fake made-up fan leaks and script leaks and things that are being declared are going to happen, and then they never manifest. But lo and behold, thanks to She-Hulk, Doomcock got invited on a couple streams again and has dusted off all his bullshit. Quantum Leap, I've been watching. It's also a show that's severely flawed, but it's so old-fashionedly formulaic. It's kind of just nice watching it, just as kind of a throwback feeling of what television used to feel like. It has room to grow and improve. Its major drawbacks is we didn't really need any of this stuff showing his diverse crew of helpers in the future who are trying to like figure out what's going on with him to get him back to his own timeline. The original Quantum Leap, spent most of its time, having Sam figure out, his dilemmas on his own with a little bit of help from Dean Stockwell. But this show like detracts from that because they're constantly cutting to like the modern day setting and seeing what this little team of engineers are up to. I'm still willing to give it a chance. It's just something to watch. Andor. For a Star Wars show, I'm extremely enjoying that one, albeit there's a distinct lack of alien life in it. It's like all humans, and there's some weird nods to the fact that they have a Mexican American as their main character, with stuff like the lines of like, oh, did you have to swim to get over here, or there's a part where they imply that as a kid he was a kid in a cage and all that kind of stuff, because apparently Mexicans had faced no hardships at all in life up until the Trump administration. So I don't know, as much as people like hate Trump, the fact that they're encoding so much anti-Trump stuff into media that is still spooling out is kind of like keeping his memory alive and giving him way much more weight and impact that he might have had otherwise if people weren't taking him so goddamn seriously. But Andor itself, it's more adult in tone, as a lot of people talk. I like the fact that it's slower paced. I miss movies that kind of allow you to have room to breathe and take in the scenery, and it's not just constantly flash cut, edit, jumping around constantly. It's schizophrenic. I feel like the long, slow, silent scenes kind of help build tension, especially since we've all been trained with this schizophrenic, TikTok-y way of making TV shows, for the short attention span crowd. It adds that feeling of like ominous, like what's going to happen? What are they waiting for? Why are we still looking at this dam in the middle of this dry Scottish-looking valley and stuff? But overall, the writing quality is good. I feel one of the biggest problems it might have really is it's not really clear who the characters you're supposed to be invested in are. Who's just disposable, people who are going to get killed off in a couple episodes after they're introduced, and who are the long-term characters that we should be invested in their storylines, because they will, be continuing on into further seasons, assuming Andor gets more than one season. If the plan is to end the show with Andor set up the way he was at the beginning of Rogue One, then they have still a lot of space to play with to get him to that spot. So I can easily imagine this being like a 2 or 3 season series at the bare minimum. Plus, compared to a lot of the other shows, I mean, I think they got like 11 or 12 episodes for this season. That's a huge amount of episodes compared to most of the stuff that goes on Disney, which is more like, if you're lucky, you get 6 or 8. Oddly though, the real great irony is the show I've been watching lately that I possibly enjoy the most and look forward to the most, quite quietly though, is Star Trek Lower Decks. Whereas their live action shows all suck. The season 3 trailer for Picard looks terrible. I tried watching Strange New Worlds because people were like, "Oh, it's better." It wasn't better. It's still just the trite writing and made by people who don't really quite grasp what Star Trek is and don't even seem to really like the fact that they're having to make Star Trek. But this is what they got hired to do, so they're gonna do it poorly. Star Trek Lower Decks, while being tonally off-putting at first, at least you can kind of get the impression that the people who are making it and writing it have actually watched Star Trek and might actually even appreciate it a little bit. Its first season was rough, but from season 2 and season 3, they seem to have done several things that I had wanted them to do, like tone Mariner down a little bit, allow us to know the bridge crew and the upper officers of the Cerritos and stuff like that. comedy's fine, but it can't just be a gag every 15 seconds. We still want something that gives us a Star Trek story with Star Trek-y themes. And Lower Decks does that way better than any of the live-action stuff that CBS All Access, or as it is now, Paramount Plus, has been giving us. Albeit there's still like a big asterisk next to it, and it's not quite the same as your classic old TNG or Voyager or Deep Space Nine, obviously. But, as I say, at least they seem to have actually at least watched these shows, take them into account, are trying to, like, expand upon the universe a little bit. The last episode I watched, which was the one that was all about an exocomp trapped on a world of owl people, was, like, deranged and weird and also kind of wonderful because of it. It's one of the more unique things I've seen in Star Trek, and possibly the funniest episode of Lower Decks I've seen in terms of actually getting me to not just kind of wryly in my mind, appreciate the joke, but actually laugh out loud at some stuff. So if you're gonna just randomly check out an episode of Lower Decks, that's not a bad one to just get a taste of. Although once again, you need at least some passing familiarity with TNG, so you know what the fucking exocomp is. And finally, of course, Rings of Power, which along with She-Hulk is another one of those shows that's out right now that, like, for all its very obvious flaws, and as if you've been watching my reviews of it, I have a lot to say about what they could have done better than what we got. Like with She-Hulk, though, it's kind of causing me to pull away a bit from the anti-woke faction of fandom, just because, like, the pre-declaration that it's going to be bad, sight unseen, and then sticking to that, irregardless of whatever is actually shown, doesn't necessarily, like, lend itself to making me feel that there's, like, any actual genuine critique to be found from the people who are, attacking the show constantly, or making it out to be the worst thing ever. The hot poker in the ass of Tolkien's ghost down in hell kind of way people are acting about this show. As I've said in my own videos, my version of For the Rings of Power of my critique of She-Hulk's, reactions of the people who are like, way to, make this about you kind of a thing. There's the thing in Rings of Power where, as I've said, for years, I've been, paying attention, and trying to understand and find what I can agree with from the anti-woke fan crowd about a lot of things. And, trying to take, people at their word about, it's not that we don't want diversity. We just don't want people, changing established characters with, changing their gender or their sexuality or their race. We want them to make original characters if you want to have, these sorts of characters in our stuff. Just don't make Luke Skywalker into a black trans woman kind of a thing. Well, Rings of Power did that. They didn't make Galadriel black. They didn't make Gandalf a woman. Elrond is probably gay, but that was always the case because he's an elf, and he's obviously hot for Durin, but at least they don't, like, get graphic about it. But, the black characters that are in it are original characters, and yet people are still like, oh my god, there's a black elf, my verisimilitude, hey, they did what you wanted and you're still bitching, so, I don't really know what to do with that. It just, it looks a little sus, shall we say, but God forbid anyone ever point out to anybody that there's some logical inconsistencies with their positions. I'm sure a couple of you are inching your fingers down to that unsubscribe button right now just for me saying this shit. Anyway, though, television's, it's not great. I haven't watched House of the Dragon yet. I'm still not even sure if I'm going to. I was already kind of burned out on Game of Thrones even before Game of Thrones ended. And frankly, Game of Thrones' popularity has had kind of subtle impacts on culture that I don't necessarily think are positive. I remember, during the early days of all the political chaos of the last half decade, seeing stuff of, like, crowds of people chanting shame at folks and thinking it's like, oh, well, they picked it up from Game of Thrones. And clearly they didn't actually get the point to that scene where Cersei is, being marched through the city streets of King's Landing and Everyone's saying shame at her. The crowd of people doing that were not the good guys. Yes, Cersei is guilty of all sorts of stuff and is not a good character, but randos off the streets aren't privy to any of the stuff that was going on with her life or her decision making. They're just jumping on a bandwagon and throwing fruit at somebody who has been declared as a bad person, but they really have no right to judge her in that way. I think that's. I mean, go figure. We've turned into such like a mob ruled witch burny kind of culture again. Is just we vent it all via the internet and not actually burn people alive at the stake. Instead, we just destroy their online reputation and get them fired from their jobs. It's the slow death sentence of go die homeless under a bridge instead of getting it over with quickly. Where even confessing your sins doesn't really get you off the hook. In much the same way that the witch trials, even if you did confess that, yes, I've, been trafficking with Satan, and he's given me a superfluous third nipple from which he can sup upon my blood in our dark woodland orgy rituals, like even if you confess all that, more often than not, you would still find yourself being executed, just perhaps not in quite so much of a painful manner as the people who refused to recant their sins and all that kind of stuff. We should all be careful about the fact that our culture is kind of sliding back towards these sorts of mentalities. A lot of effort was put in over the last few centuries to try to get human beings away from large crowd mob thinking. And the internet has allowed that back into our lives through social media, particularly through sites like Twitter, although they're hardly the only one. And I don't think Elon Musk potentially owning it's going to necessarily make that any better because, hey, it gets clicks, and that's what everything is about, is delicious clicks, 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 clicks. So, I don't know. I guess just some random thoughts on some TV shows and just the general malaise of the entertainment world right now. So yeah, take all that as you will. Hit buttons as you feel are as appropriate. And until next time, stay something or other. I don't know. Whatever.